In the world of live performance, very few transformations are as striking as the one Elvis Presley went through at the end of the 1960s. The man who once stood in a simple suit and shook the world with rock and roll was about to re-emerge in a completely different form. Not just as a singer, but as a visual icon, draped in bold designs, shining fabrics, and stage outfits that would later define an entire era of entertainment fashion. Between 1969 and 1972, Elvis didn't just return to the stage, he rebuilt his identity. This was the beginning of the jumpsuit era. It all started in Las Vegas, where Elvis made his comeback to live performances after years away from touring. Instead of relying on the traditional stage outfits of the time, he introduced a fresh visual language: two-piece outfits, karate-inspired cuts, sharp collars, and bold monochrome designs that immediately set him apart. At first, the look was simple: clean suits with minimal decoration. But even in that simplicity, there was power. Elvis was no longer just performing music. He was commanding attention through movement, presence, and style. One of the earliest styles from this period was a black two-piece outfit, often referred to for its clean, structured appearance. At first glance, it looked like a standard suit, but its construction revealed subtle detailing in the chest area, designed to hold the fabric in place during intense stage movement. As Elvis continued his early Vegas shows, he began experimenting, mixing belts, scarves, and variations of the same base outfit, slowly building what would become a signature stage identity. Soon after, white karate-inspired designs began to appear. These outfits marked a turning point. The white two-piece jumpsuit, with its flowing sleeves and structured collar design, reflected martial arts influences blended with stage fashion. The fabric carried subtle patterns running vertically down the chest, giving the illusion of height and motion, even when Elvis stood still. Each sleeve widened near the wrist, often finished with button detailing that added elegance to the overall look. These early suits were not just costumes, they were performance tools. As Elvis moved through 1969 into 1970, his stage presence evolved alongside his wardrobe. He began integrating more complex variations: white jumpsuits with textured embroidery, golden accents, and hand-finished detailing that made each piece unique. The outfits were no longer just clothing. They were part of the show's identity. One of the standout designs from this era was a white brocade-style suit, heavily detailed around the chest and collar. The embroidery gave it a royal, almost architectural feel, resembling carved stone patterns. In some versions, subtle color variations like orange trim were introduced, showing how Elvis and his design team were constantly experimenting with visual impact under stage lighting. Another rare variation included darker tones: black brocade suits with gold accents or unusual decorative motifs. These suits were not widely photographed, which adds to their mystery. Some reports suggest they may have been worn during specific Las Vegas engagements in early 1970, though exact documentation remains unclear. As the jumpsuit concept developed further, color became a major storytelling element. Blue tones appeared next. The blue brocade suits introduced a softer, yet equally powerful visual identity. Aqua-colored fabric combined with floral embroidery and gold highlights created a shimmering effect under stage lights. These suits were carefully designed not just for appearance, but for movement. Every step Elvis took reflected light differently, making him appear almost dynamic, even in still frames. Alongside these designs, Elvis's belts also became a signature element. Each outfit was paired with specially crafted belts featuring woven patterns, stone decorations, and fringe details. These belts were not accessories in the traditional sense. They were part of the costume architecture, completing the visual structure of each jumpsuit. Footwear also became standardized. Black leather boots became a consistent choice, grounding the extravagant upper designs with a strong, stable base. By 1970, Elvis's stage wardrobe had fully transformed. He was no longer performing in traditional suits or simple outfits. Instead, he had developed a complete performance identity built around customized jumpsuits, each one designed for specific stage moments, lighting conditions, and musical moods. One notable design from this transitional period was the concho-style suit, often associated with filming sessions for Elvis's concert documentary work. These outfits were frequently reused with different belts and minor modifications, showing how flexible the wardrobe system had become. Another key variation included fringe-based suits. These featured long decorative strands across the chest and arms, designed to move with Elvis's body, adding motion even when he was standing still. Under concert lighting, these fringes created a visual rhythm that matched the music itself. As the years progressed into 1971, Elvis began expanding the wardrobe even further. Capes were introduced for the first time, marking a dramatic shift in stage presentation. These capes were often lined with contrasting colors and attached to specific jumpsuits, making entrances and exits more theatrical than ever before. Firework-themed suits also emerged during this phase. These designs featured bold patterns and sometimes included matching capes, reinforcing the idea that Elvis's performances were no longer just concerts. They were full visual productions. By early 1972, the jumpsuit era had fully matured. Elvis now had multiple suit categories: pinwheel designs, cape suits, embroidered classics, and experimental one-off pieces. Each outfit was carefully cataloged and often associated with specific tours or Las Vegas engagements. Some suits were only worn once or twice, while others became recurring stage favorites. Variations of white, black, blue, and red designs appeared frequently, each one adjusted for lighting, stage movement, and camera recording conditions during live filming projects like concert documentaries. By this point, Elvis Presley had created something entirely new in live performance history: a stage wardrobe system that blended fashion, identity, and performance psychology into a single visual language. And this was only the beginning. By 1972, Elvis Presley's stage identity had fully shifted into something larger than performance. What had begun as experimentation in Las Vegas was now evolving into a complete visual universe. The jumpsuit was no longer just an outfit. It had become a symbol of power, control, and reinvention at the highest level of live entertainment. This was the period where everything intensified. Colors became louder, designs became more complex, and Elvis, now fully confident in this new stage identity, began to push the boundaries of what a performer could wear while still commanding total authority over a live audience. The early simplicity of the late 1960s was gone. In its place stood a wardrobe system built for spectacle. One of the defining features of this era was the expansion of themed suits. Elvis and his designers began developing outfits that carried strong visual motifs. Stars, pinwheels, birds, flames, and abstract geometric patterns. Each design wasn't random. It was built to reflect movement under stage lights, especially during high-energy performances, where Elvis would shift between slow ballads and explosive rock sections. Among the most recognizable developments of this time were the cape suits. For the first time, Elvis introduced flowing stage capes attached to his jumpsuits. These capes transformed his entrances dramatically. When he walked onto stage, the silhouette was no longer human in a traditional sense. It became theatrical, almost cinematic. The capes were often lined with contrasting colors like red, blue, gold, or silver, designed to catch light during movement and create a floating effect behind him. This was a major turning point in live performance aesthetics. During major Las Vegas engagements and touring periods, Elvis began rotating multiple suits within single shows. No longer tied to one consistent outfit, he now treated clothing as part of performance structure. Certain suits were reserved for opening numbers, others for emotional ballads, and some for high-energy finales. By this point, each jumpsuit had its own identity. Some designs focused on embroidery-heavy chest patterns, giving the illusion of armor or ceremonial dress. Others leaned into minimalism, but used color intensity to dominate stage lighting. The result was a wardrobe that felt alive, constantly evolving with each performance cycle. As 1972 progressed, Elvis's international presence expanded dramatically. This led to one of the most important moments in his career: large-scale televised concerts and global broadcasts. For these performances, costumes were carefully selected, not just for stage impact, but for camera visibility. Bright whites, deep blues, and reflective gold accents became essential. Designers began engineering suits with television in mind: how they would appear under studio lighting, how they would translate in close-up shots, and how movement would register on film. One of the most iconic visual eras came from this period of televised performance evolution. Elvis's suits began to feature symbolic patterns that fans would later associate with specific songs and eras. Pinwheel designs, starburst effects, and eagle-inspired motifs became recurring visual themes. These were not just artistic choices. They were part of building a recognizable performance identity that audiences could instantly associate with Elvis, even without sound. During live tours, Elvis also began refining the relationship between suit and belt design. Belts became increasingly important stylistic anchors. Instead of being simple accessories, they were now central design elements that tied the entire outfit together. Some belts featured heavy decorative stones, others used metallic patterns or woven textures. In many cases, Elvis would even switch belts between performances while wearing the same jumpsuit, subtly altering the visual identity of the outfit. By early 1973, this system had become extremely refined. This was the beginning of what many consider the peak of Elvis's stage visual power. The Madison Square Garden performances marked a historic moment, not just musically, but visually. Elvis appeared in highly detailed jumpsuits that had been specifically designed for large arena environments. These outfits had to perform under extreme lighting conditions, massive audience distance, and television recording simultaneously. The result was a wardrobe that looked almost unreal from a distance: bright, reflective, and commanding. During this period, bird-themed suits, starburst patterns, and Egyptian-inspired designs began to appear more frequently. These outfits gave Elvis a mythic presence on stage, almost as if each performance was part of a larger narrative rather than a standalone concert. The 1973 Aloha from Hawaii broadcast further pushed this visual identity onto a global stage. For this event, Elvis's costume design reached a level of refinement that balanced elegance with spectacle. The suit chosen for this performance became one of the most iconic in his entire career. It was structured, regal, and designed specifically for satellite broadcasting, ensuring that viewers across the world would experience the same visual impact. This performance marked the first time a global audience experienced Elvis's jumpsuit era in full clarity. From this point onward, his stage image was permanently defined. Throughout 1973 and into 1974, the variety of suits expanded even further. New designs included flame-inspired patterns, metallic embroidery, and nature-themed motifs like vines and birds. Each suit was associated with specific tours, often debuting in Las Vegas before being used on national tours or televised appearances. Some suits were intentionally reused with modifications: different belts, altered capes, or adjusted color accents, allowing the same base design to feel completely new on stage. By 1974, Elvis's wardrobe had become one of the most advanced performance costume systems in entertainment history. He now had multiple active categories: cape suits for dramatic entrances, lightweight suits for high-energy sets, heavy embroidered suits for televised performances, experimental designs for special tours and recordings. Each category served a purpose, each suit told a story, and together they formed the visual identity of a performer who had completely redefined what it meant to appear on stage. But even at the peak of this golden era, change was already beginning to form beneath the surface. The next phase would be more complex, more experimental, and far more emotionally layered. When Elvis Presley stepped back onto the stage in 1969, it wasn't just a comeback. It was a complete reinvention of an artist who had already defined an era once before. The world remembered him as the leather jacket rebel of the 1950s, the shaking hips, the television scandals, the voice that changed popular music forever. But the man who returned to live performance in Las Vegas was not the same figure who had left the spotlight years earlier. He was older, more controlled, and far more aware of image, presentation, and spectacle. What emerged from this new phase was something entirely different, a visual identity built not just on sound, but on costume, movement, and stage power. This was the beginning of what fans now call the jumpsuit era, a period between 1969 and 1972 that quietly transformed Elvis into a living stage monument. The return to the stage, 1969, Elvis's first major return performances in Las Vegas in 1969 marked a turning point. Instead of relying on traditional suits or casual outfits, he began experimenting with stagewear that could match the intensity of live performance in large casino venues. Early on, the look was still simple. Two-piece combinations dominated the stage. Dark jackets, clean trousers, and minimal decoration. These outfits were not yet the fully developed rhinestone spectacles he would later become famous for. Instead, they represented transition between old Hollywood simplicity and a new kind of theatrical excess. Even then, something was clear. Elvis was no longer dressing like a singer. He was dressing like a spectacle. The first structured stage identity. As the Las Vegas engagements continued, Elvis began refining his appearance with more structured outfits inspired by martial arts uniforms and performance tailoring. The influence of karate-style cuts became especially visible. High collars, straight lines, and sharp symmetry replaced the looser fashion of his earlier years. These designs were not random. They were intentional, designed to make him look powerful under hot stage lighting and in front of large audiences. Black and white combinations became early signatures of this phase. The contrast represented duality, strength and elegance, control and charisma. Even small construction details mattered. Reinforced seams, stitched chest patterns, and tightened waist structures ensured that the outfits held form during movement-heavy performances. The birth of the casual stage armor. One of the most significant shifts during this period was the transformation of clothing into what could almost be described as stage armor. Elvis was no longer just wearing outfits. He was wearing identity pieces. Early two-piece designs featured subtle embroidery and controlled detailing around the chest and collar. These were not yet the heavy rhinestone suits of the mid-1970s, but they already carried the DNA of what was to come. White and black versions were frequently rotated. The white variations often emphasized purity and elegance under stage lighting, while black versions created a sharper, more dominant presence. Each variation served a purpose: to control how Elvis appeared under different performance conditions. The evolution into the jumpsuit concept. By the early 1970s, the transformation accelerated. The simple two-piece outfits began evolving into full jumpsuits, single-piece garments designed for fluid movement, dramatic presentation, and visual continuity from head to toe. These suits were not just fashion statements. They solved practical stage problems. They prevented wardrobe shifts during high-energy performances. They created a unified silhouette visible from long distances. They allowed dramatic customization with belts, capes, and embroidery. This was the moment where Elvis's stage identity stopped being fashion and became design engineering for performance. Early signature designs, 1970 to 1971. As Elvis entered the 1970s, his wardrobe became more experimental. Designers began introducing decorative patterns across the chest and shoulders. Some suits featured geometric embroidery, while others experimented with metallic threadwork and bold color blocking. The high collar became a recurring feature. It framed his face under intense lighting, giving him a more authoritative and almost cinematic presence. Sleeves widened slightly at the cuffs, often secured with button detailing that added rhythm and symmetry to arm movement during performance gestures. Even belts began to evolve into statement pieces, wide, decorative, and often customized separately from the suit itself. Las Vegas as a design laboratory, Las Vegas played a crucial role in shaping this transformation. Unlike touring environments, Vegas allowed constant wardrobe refinement. Elvis could test outfits across multiple nights, adjust designs, and immediately see how audiences reacted. This created a feedback loop between performance and costume design. If a suit reflected light too strongly, it was adjusted. If movement felt restricted, it was redesigned. If audience response increased, the design language was expanded. Vegas wasn't just a stage, it was a workshop. The rise of signature visual elements. By 1971, Elvis's wardrobe began developing recognizable patterns that would define the entire jumpsuit era. Chest-centered embroidery designs, high ornamental collars, integrated belt systems, symmetrical sleeve detailing, increasing use of metallic accents. These elements would later evolve into the heavily decorated suits of 1973 to 1977, but their foundation was laid here. What began as simple stage clothing was becoming symbolic armor for a performer operating at global scale. A performer becoming a living icon. As the transformation continued, Elvis's presence on stage changed dramatically. He was no longer simply singing songs. He was commanding space. Every movement, turning toward the audience, stepping into the spotlight, raising his arm during vocal peaks, was framed by costume design that amplified impact. The audience wasn't just watching a performer, they were witnessing a carefully constructed visual system built around charisma, control, and scale. By the end of this early phase, Elvis Presley had fully established the foundation of what would become one of the most recognizable costume evolutions in entertainment history. The next stage would push even further, introducing rhinestones, capes, dramatic color systems, and the legendary suits that defined his 1972 to 1977 performances. But before that explosion of design, there was this quieter foundation phase, experimental, structured, and deeply intentional. By 1972, Elvis Presley's stage identity had crossed a threshold. What began as structured two-piece stagewear in Las Vegas had now evolved into something far more ambitious. Fully realized performance costumes designed not just for function, but for impact, symbolism, and spectacle. This was the year the jumpsuit stopped being stage clothing and became a visual language. 1972, the year everything changed. The early experiments of 1969 to 1971 had established a foundation, but 1972 marked the true explosion of design creativity. Elvis was no longer testing ideas, he was refining a complete performance system. Outfits became more elaborate, more decorative, and more deliberate in their storytelling. Every suit now carried identity, mood, and stage psychology. The goal was no longer simplicity or control. The goal was dominance. The rise of ornamental design. One of the most noticeable changes in this period was the sudden increase in ornamentation. Suits began featuring heavy chest embroidery, metallic thread patterns, structured collar designs, symmetrical decorative panels, early gemstone and stud detailing. These elements were not random decoration. They were carefully placed to guide the viewer's eye toward Elvis's upper body, his face, his voice, and his gestures. Stage lighting in Las Vegas amplified every detail. Designers began building suits that interacted with light itself, creating reflection, shimmer, and movement. even when Elvis stood still. Capes enter the stage language. A defining innovation of this era was the introduction of capes. At first, capes were simple extensions, fabric additions meant to enhance silhouette. But very quickly, they became symbolic extensions of Elvis's presence. When Elvis turned on stage, the cape created a delayed motion effect, expanding his outline beyond the human form. It was no longer just performance, it was theatrical transformation. The cape became a visual echo of the music itself, rising, falling, and lingering after each movement. The engineering behind the glamour. While audiences saw glamour, behind the scenes these suits were highly engineered garments. Each jumpsuit was built with performance mechanics in mind. Reinforced seams for stage movement, flexible waist construction for guitar and mic handling, weight distribution to support heavy decoration, custom tailoring for fast costume changes, breathable material layers for intense stage heat. What looked like fashion was actually functional engineering designed for endurance under extreme performance conditions. Elvis was performing multiple shows in a single engagement, often under intense lighting and audience pressure. The clothing had to survive as much as he did. The birth of signature silhouettes. By mid-1972, a recognizable Elvis silhouette had fully formed. It consisted of high, structured collar framing the face, tight torso fit, emphasizing posture, flared or decorated legs for stage presence, wide decorative belts, breaking the vertical line, symmetrical chest, detailing drawing focus upward. This silhouette became instantly recognizable even from the back of large arenas. Elvis was no longer blending into the stage. He was becoming the stage's center of gravity. The emotional language of costume. Each design choice during this era carried emotional weight. White suits often communicated purity, authority, and controlled elegance. Dark suits emphasized intensity, mystery, and power. More elaborate designs, those with heavy embroidery or layered textures, suggested spectacle and theatrical dominance. Elvis was now using clothing the way a filmmaker uses lighting, or a composer uses instrumentation, as emotional direction. Vegas, as the control room Las Vegas, remained the testing ground for all of this evolution. Unlike touring environments, Vegas allowed rapid iteration. Designers could adjust suits between shows, refine detailing, and respond to audience reaction almost immediately. If a design hit, it stayed. If it distracted from performance, it was simplified. If it amplified applause moments, it was expanded. This constant feedback loop turned Elvis's wardrobe into an evolving system rather than a fixed collection. The first fully iconic era approaches. By the end of 1972, Elvis had moved beyond experimentation. The groundwork of 1969 to 1971 and the breakthroughs of 1972 were now merging into something far more iconic, a fully developed visual identity that would dominate the next phase of his career. The rhinestone era was about to begin. Capes would become heavier, designs would become more symbolic, colors would become more aggressive, and Elvis himself would become less of a performer and more of a mythic figure on stage. 1972 was not the peak of Elvis's jumpsuit evolution. It was the ignition point. What followed in 1973 and beyond would push the concept into full spectacle, introducing national symbols, mythic imagery, elaborate cape systems, and suits that turned each performance into a visual event. The king was no longer just returning to music. He was building a permanent stage mythology. In 1973, Elvis's wardrobe reached a level of complexity never seen before in live entertainment. Designers were no longer creating outfits in isolation. They were building entire visual identities around each suit, each one designed to communicate a different emotional and symbolic message on stage. The stage had become a gallery of moving art. The rise of symbolic design language. A major shift in this period was the introduction of symbolic imagery directly into the suits. Instead of abstract decoration, suits now featured eagles representing strength and national identity, pharaoh-inspired motifs reflecting power and legacy, phoenix designs symbolizing rebirth and transformation, starburst and sun patterns representing energy and dominance, animal-inspired embroidery suggesting primal force. These were not random aesthetic choices. They were deliberate attempts to project Elvis as something larger than a performer, almost a living myth. The American Eagle concept. One of the most defining visual ideas of this era was the American Eagle theme. The eagle motif became a recurring symbol across multiple suits, often positioned across the chest or back, spreading outward like wings when Elvis moved. On stage, the effect was powerful. When Elvis raised his arms, the eagle design appeared to expand, creating a visual illusion of flight and dominance. This was not just fashion, it was engineered symbolism designed for arena-scale impact. Pharaoh and Mythic influence. Another major design direction in 1973 was the introduction of ancient Egyptian-inspired aesthetics. Pharaoh-style suits featured high ornamental collars resembling royal regalia, structured chest panels inspired by ceremonial armor, gold accents representing authority and divinity, cape systems that emphasized vertical presence. These designs reframed Elvis not just as a modern entertainer, but as a figure of historical permanence, someone aligned with ancient power structures and timeless authority. On stage, the effect was almost ceremonial. Phoenix designs, rebirth in motion. The phoenix motif became one of the most emotionally resonant design ideas of the entire era. The phoenix represented rebirth, transformation, and survival through change, all themes deeply connected to Elvis's career arc. These suits often featured curving feather-like embroidery, radiating chest patterns, bright, contrasting colors, red, blue, silver variations, wing-like visual symmetry across the torso. Under stage lights, the designs appeared to move as Elvis performed, creating a sense of rising motion even during still moments. It was costume design meant to simulate life. The cape becomes a weapon of performance. By 1973, the cape had evolved from accessory to essential performance tool. No longer a simple extension of the suit, it had become a dramatic device used to control audience attention. When Elvis turned, the cape followed with delay. When he paused, it framed him like a monument. When he moved, it expanded his presence beyond the human silhouette. In many ways, the cape functioned like a visual amplifier for emotion. It turned movement into spectacle. 1974. Maximum ornamentation. By 1974, the design philosophy reached its most intense phase. If 1972 was experimentation and 1973 was expansion, then 1974 was saturation. Every suit now carried extreme detail. Nothing was minimal. Nothing was subtle. Design elements included dense rhinestone coverage, multi-layer embroidery systems, complex belt constructions with oversized buckles, color layering across chest, sleeves, and legs, coordinated cape linings in contrasting tones. The stage look had become fully theatrical in a way that blurred the line between concert and performance art. The American Eagle evolves. The American Eagle concept expanded further in 1974. The design became more refined and more dramatic, often paired with elaborate belts and cape systems that emphasized motion. On stage, this created a striking effect. Elvis appeared almost framed by national symbolism, but not in a literal political sense. Instead, as a performance icon representing scale, identity, and cultural dominance. The Pharaoh legacy continues. The Pharaoh-inspired suits also evolved in 1974, becoming more structured and visually heavier. Gold tones became more dominant, and collar designs grew more intricate. These suits gave Elvis a commanding presence that felt almost ritualistic, as if each performance was a ceremony rather than a concert. The emotional duality of 1974. Designs. Despite the visual intensity, there was a deeper emotional layer to the 1974 wardrobe. Two contrasting identities were emerging. The mythic Elvis, bold, symbolic, larger than life. The human Elvis, grounded, performing under immense pressure. The wardrobe had to support both identities simultaneously. This duality is what made the era so visually powerful. The stage as transformation space. By this point, Elvis's performances were no longer concerts in the traditional sense. They were transformations. Each suit acted as a trigger for a different version of Elvis. The eagle suit created authority. The phoenix suit created rebirth. The pharaoh suit created permanence. The starburst suits created energy and spectacle. The audience wasn't just watching songs. They were witnessing identity shifts in real time. By the end of 1974, Elvis's jumpsuit era had reached its most elaborate visual peak. But this was not the final stage. In 1975 to 1977, the designs would become even more diverse, more experimental, and in some cases more personal, reflecting fatigue, reinvention, and late-era stage identity. The mythology would continue to grow, but it would also begin to fracture. By 1975, Elvis Presley's jumpsuit era had moved into its most complicated and overloaded phase, where design, repetition, and reinvention all existed at the same time. The early clarity of his stage identity had already evolved into something far more layered, and now the wardrobe was no longer about introducing completely new concepts, but about expanding variations of existing ideas. Multiple versions of the same suits began appearing with different colors, altered embroidery, and modified belts, creating a system where one design could exist in several forms depending on the performance. This made his stage presence visually unpredictable, even when he wore familiar costumes. During this period, hybrid two-piece stage outfits also became more common, blurring the line between jumpsuits and separate garments. These were designed for practical performance needs, allowing easier movement, quicker changes, and reduced physical strain during long shows. Even though they were simpler in structure, they still carried Elvis's signature visual identity through high collars, bold silhouettes, and decorative chest detailing. This shift reflected a growing emphasis on functionality, as the demands of constant live performance required clothing that could support endurance rather than just visual spectacle. At the same time, symbolic designs like the phoenix, eagle, and Egyptian-inspired suits continued to appear, but their meaning began to shift. The phoenix motif, once a clear symbol of rebirth and transformation, now appeared in multiple color variations such as red, blue, and black, each carrying a different emotional tone. Instead of representing a single idea, these designs became flexible visual tools that could change the mood of a performance. Similarly, Egyptian-style suits, which once emphasized grandeur and authority, began to feel more reflective and less ceremonial, as if the weight of repetition had softened their original meaning. By 1976, Elvis's wardrobe strategy changed again, as many older suits returned into regular rotation. Instead of constantly creating new designs, the focus shifted toward reusing and adapting existing ones. These earlier jumpsuits were often modified with new belts or cape linings, giving them slightly different visual identities while preserving their original structure. This return to older designs created a sense of continuity, as if different stages of his career were now existing together on the same timeline. Another noticeable change during this phase was the rise of highly colorful and visually intense suits. These designs relied heavily on bright patterns, reflective surfaces, and dense decorative work to maintain stage impact in large venues. However, despite this visual intensity, symbolic storytelling became less direct. Instead of clearly defined motifs like eagles or pharaohs, many suits began focusing more on abstract patterns and light interaction, emphasizing atmosphere rather than meaning. The wardrobe was no longer trying to tell specific stories, but to create an overall visual energy that matched the performance environment. By 1977, Elvis's stage identity had reached its final form, built from a mixture of older iconic suits, modified designs, and simplified performance outfits. There was no single dominant style anymore. Instead, his wardrobe functioned like an archive of his entire jumpsuit evolution. Each performance combined elements of earlier eras, creating a layered visual history on stage. The Mexican sundial suit and other late-era designs became strongly associated with his final performances, representing the closing chapter of a long artistic transformation. In the end, the jumpsuit era did not simply end. It dissolved into memory through repetition and adaptation. What began in 1969 as a simple stage reinvention had, by 1977, become a complete visual legacy. The suits were no longer just costumes. They were a record of evolution, capturing every phase of Elvis Presley's transformation from returning performer to global stage icon. Elvis Presley's jumpsuit era stands as a defining chapter in live performance history. From 1969 to 1977, his stage outfits evolved from simple structured designs into powerful symbols of identity, transformation, and spectacle. Each suit reflected a different phase of his journey, blending music, fashion, and performance into one visual experience. By the end, these jumpsuits were no longer just costumes. They had become a record of his evolution as an artist. Even after his final performances, they remain a lasting symbol of his impact on stage and popular culture. In the end, the jumpsuit era did not simply end. It dissolved into memory through repetition and adaptation. What began in 1969 as a simple stage reinvention had, by 1977, become a complete visual legacy. The suits were no longer just costumes. They were a record of evolution, capturing every phase of Elvis Presley's transformation from returning performer to global stage icon. Elvis Presley's jumpsuit era stands as a defining chapter in live performance history. From 1969 to 1977, his stage outfits evolved from simple structured designs into powerful symbols of identity, transformation, and spectacle. Each suit reflected a different phase of his journey, blending music, fashion, and performance into one visual experience. By the end, these jumpsuits were no longer just costumes. They had become a record of his evolution as an artist. Even after his final performances, they remain a lasting symbol of his impact on stage and popular culture.